me start with a stat that surprises a lot of people. The median retirement savings for Americans ages 55 to 64 is only $185,000. That means after an entire career, half of Americans approaching retirement have saved less than that. Now compare that to what many retirement models suggest that people may need to support a long retirement, and it's easy to see why one question keeps coming up: am I behind? But here's the important part. Most retirement benchmarks floating around online are either oversimplified or misunderstood. Today, I want to walk you through what the data actually shows about retirement savings, why the common benchmark even exists, and what most people miss when they compare themselves to these numbers. Because retirement planning isn't all about hitting a number, it's about understanding what that number actually means for your situation. And remember, a retirement without a plan is only just a guess. Let's look at the broader picture. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the median household earning from ages 55 to 64 is about $185,000, while the average is about $537,000. The reason why those numbers look so different is fairly simple. A small number of very large retirement accounts pull that average upward, but the median shows what actual households have saved. And this is why statistics can be so confusing, because a lot of headlines will use averages and others will use medians. And depending on which one you see, that picture can look very different. But either way, one thing remains clear. Many people approaching retirement are unsure whether they've saved enough. You've probably seen retirement benchmarks like these, with the most popular coming from Fidelity, which says that you should have 1 times your salary saved by age 30, 3 times by age 40, 6 times by age 50, 8 times by age 60, and 10 times your salary saved by retirement. These guidelines are not predictions, they're just general savings trajectories designed to help people keep on track if they plan to retire around their late 60s. But these benchmarks are planned around several assumptions. They assume steady career income growth, consistent savings, and long-term returns that are close to historical averages. They also assume something that often goes overlooked, and that's that Social Security will replace a portion of your income. And that's where benchmarks can start to break down, because most models will assume that Social Security will replace 30 to 40% of pre-retirement income for the average worker. That means the portfolio doesn't have to replace the entire paycheck, which can be misleading because, unfortunately, we don't know what Social Security is going to be like in the future. So planning around or expecting that Social Security is going to replace 30 to 40% of your pre-retirement income isn't always a best case scenario. Another assumption involves investment returns, and a lot of retirement projections will assume that long-term market returns resemble that of historical averages, which can be great if your portfolio is always aggressive throughout your career leading up to retirement, which might be the case for some people, but not for everybody. And if your risk tolerance isn't always going to be aggressive, then basing your projection off these averages can also be misleading. And the third assumption being spending pattern. And research has shown that many retirees will actually spend less in retirement than they do in their working years, and even more so, or especially after their first few years in retirement. Because of these variables, 2 households with the exact same savings number can have completely different retirement outcomes. Remember, a benchmark only works if your life matches the assumptions behind it. The more important question to ask yourself is not how much you have saved, but how much income can your savings produce? One framework often discussed in retirement planning is the concept of the safe withdrawal rate, right? The most well-known rule being the 4% rule, which suggests that a person can withdraw 4% of their portfolio annually, adjusted for inflation, and has a high probability of having that money last for 30 years. More recent research from firms like Morningstar has shown that safe withdrawal rates can vary based on market conditions and assumptions. But the principle still helps illustrate how savings translate into income. For example, take a $1 million portfolio. They'll generate $40,000 a year pre-tax based off of that 4% withdrawal rate. But retirement income doesn't just come from one place, right? Many households will receive income from Social Security, pension, taxable investments, as well as part-time work, which means the portfolio only needs to fill the gap, and the gap being the space that you need to reach your income goal in retirement, which is why your savings don't fund retirement alone. They just complete the income puzzle, if you will. There are 3 common reasons people feel behind when they compare themselves to retirement benchmarks. First, they're comparing themselves to statistics that contain very high earners, which will inflate averages. Second, many people forget Social Security when thinking about their future income. Third, benchmarks only show a single moment in time and not the full retirement strategy. And when people focus on a number, they're missing out on the bigger picture. And retirement outcomes depend on many variables, including spending needs, taxes, income sources, longevity, and flexibility. Again, two households with identical savings balances can have completely different retirement outcomes depending on how those pieces fit together. When people get closer to retirement, the conversation usually shifts away from those benchmarks and towards bigger planning questions. Questions like, what are your expected spending needs? What income sources will you have? How will taxes affect withdrawals? How long might retirement last? And how flexible is my plan if markets change? The benchmark might help start the conversation, but the plan determines the outcome. So if you look at retirement projections and think you're behind, here's the perspective I would keep in mind. Benchmarks are useful for direction, but they are not the diagnosis. The real goal shouldn't be hitting a savings number. It's creating a plan that connects your savings, your income sources, your taxes, and your timeline. Because retirement confidence doesn't come from comparing yourself to a benchmark. It comes from understanding your plan and how it works. The benchmark gets the attention, but the plan creates confidence. Thank you for coming to today's episode of Tommy 2 Cents. And just a reminder, if you ever want to set a meeting with me to go over your situation, I'd be happy to do so. Just click on the link below and schedule a time to meet. I'm happy to help in however I can, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take it easy.